$368 billion for nuclear submarines that will allow Australia to maintain security in its surrounding ocean. Or $368 billion thrown away for nuclear submarines that may never arrive and will only seek to inflame tensions in the region. That's Aukus, depending upon who you speak to. A three-way partnership between Australia, the UK and the US, Aukus is divided into two pillars. Pillar 2 has been described broadly as a platform for advanced technology cooperation, including things such as quantum science and electronic warfare. Pillar 1 is the one everyone's arguing about. That's the one involving the submarines. Under the Aukus agreement, Australia is scheduled to buy 3 to 5 Virginia-class nuclear-powered submarines from the US, starting in 2032. Australia will also be building its own nuclear-powered conventional attack submarines, known as SSN Aukus, and plans to have a total of 8 in its fleet by the 2040s. But there are persistent questions as to when, if ever, Australia will get its US-built submarines. They take years and billions of dollars to build. And time is of the essence. Australia's existing Collins-class diesel-electric submarines are already being extended far beyond their expected working lives. They're spending more and more time being repaired and upgraded, and less time at sea. But if comments from the US naval establishment are anything to go by, there's little chance that 2032 deadline for the first of these subs will be met. And that's largely because of 2 words.
America first.
Under the Aukus deal, the US is legally prevented from selling any submarine to Australia if losing that submarine would degrade the US Navy's undersea capability. The President of the day must sign off that essentially a submarine is surplus to American needs before it can be sold to Australia. The US projects it needs 66 attack submarines to defend itself. It currently has 49. The US Navy estimates it needs to be building Virginia-class submarines at a rate of 2 a year to meet its own defence requirements, and at a rate of 2.33 a year to have enough boats to sell any to Australia. Senior admirals say the Navy is currently building those subs at an annual rate of about 1.13. Without a dramatic increase in production, Australia will never see a single Virginia-class submarine. Similarly, in the UK, there are persistent concerns over the ability of shipyards there to design and build the Aukus-class submarine on budget or on time. That's an issue for Australia because it won't really know how exactly to build one of those subs until the UK builds their first one. The UK government's Major Projects Agency has already said the reactor project for the Aukus submarine is unachievable. With Australia's ageing Collins-class fleet and doubts over the supply of the US-built subs, any delay or cost overrun in the UK program could leave Australia with a capability gap, with no submarines. Even if Australia is able to buy Virginia-class submarines or build its Aukus attack subs in Adelaide, critics have raised concerns over who will have sovereign control over these boats. The government insists that any submarine that Australia buys or builds will be wholly sovereign to Australia, commanded and crewed by Australian officers and sailors under an Australian flag. But critics argue that the nuclear technology that powers these submarines will remain the domain of the US, and that the US, through the Aukus deal, could draw Australia into a conflict with China. There is a view that these submarines may have Australian flags on them, but operate in service of the US.
When submarines are provided from the United States to Australia, it's not like they're lost. They will be deployed by the closest possible allied force.
Often euphemised as ensuring the security, resilience and prosperity of the Indo-Pacific, AUKUS is about China. It is expressly designed to counter China and contain its rise as a military, economic and diplomatic power. AUKUS seeks to preserve US dominance across the Pacific Ocean. AUKUS proponents argue China is engaged in an unprecedented military build-up, and that liberal democracies like Australia, dependent on a rules-based international order, face the most uncertain global landscape since the end of the Second World War. The counter-argument is that China has never sought to be a hegemonic power. It has a handful of military bases overseas, including those it's building on disputed islands in the South China Sea. But the US has hundreds of military installations around the world. including in Australia. Critics of AUKUS argue that rather than placate tensions and balance power in the Indo-Pacific, AUKUS only ratchets up tensions and inflames mistrust, pushing China towards a further hardening of its unlawful claims over the South China Sea and to greater militarisation. Part of the suspicions surrounding AUKUS lie in its origin. There was no warning, no public or parliamentary discussion, no debate about its rationale or reason. As is often the case with matters of defence, the cloak of national security has meant the deal avoided genuine interrogation. There is no social licence for AUKUS, regardless of how often that phrase is repeated by government, because Australia was never asked. There was no consultation, only a fait accompli and the bizarre COVID-era sight of 3 world leaders on screens, each in a different continent, announcing the same arcane deal.
And so, friends, AUKUS is born.
And while much has been made about the deal's price tag, there's also a new responsibility heaped on Australia. For the first time ever, this country will need to work out how to manage high-level nuclear waste. A nuclear-powered submarine can expect a working life of 3 decades. The spent fuel of a submarine powered by highly enriched uranium can remain dangerously radioactive for millennia. For Australia's proposed nuclear-powered submarine fleet, there is, at present, nowhere for that radioactive spent fuel to go. As a non-nuclear country and party to the Non-Proliferation Treaty, Australia has no history of and no capacity for managing high-level nuclear waste. But Australia's not alone. There is currently no site anywhere on Earth for the permanent storage of high-level nuclear waste. The US and UK, which have run nuclear submarines for decades, still do not have permanent storage facilities for the nuclear waste left behind by their submarines. Finland is currently building a massive underground storage facility. It's taken 40 years and cost €1 billion in the bedrock 450 metres beneath an island. Because Australia's submarines will run on highly enriched uranium, the waste left behind is not only toxic for millennia, it is a significant non-proliferation risk. Highly enriched uranium can be used to make weapons. The 8 nuclear-powered submarines proposed for Australia's Navy will require roughly 4 tonnes of highly enriched uranium to fuel their sealed reactor units, enough for about 160 nuclear warheads on some estimates. The spent fuel will require military-grade security to safeguard it. The AUKUS agreement expressly states that dealing with the submarine's nuclear waste is solely Australia's responsibility. A spokesperson for the Australian Submarine Agency said, "The government is committed to the highest levels of nuclear stewardship, including the safe and secure disposal of waste. As the government has said, the disposal of high-level radioactive waste won't be required until the 2050s, when Australia's first nuclear-powered submarine is expected to be decommissioned." That none of the world leaders who announced the AUKUS alliance remain in office today highlights the point that Australia will be dealing with its consequences for at least decades, possibly longer. AUKUS was supposed to be the answer. It was how Australia would secure its future, safeguard its place in the world, and underpin the peace and prosperity of its future generations. But instead of answers, the secretive nature of AUKUS has brought only more questions, more criticisms, more concern, and more uncertainty.